Rodrigo, a renowned psychiatrist, stared at the emptiness of the bed beside him, trying to control the anxiety that was growing in his chest. Dudley was not there. He glanced at the clock on the bedside table and saw that it was past 2 in the morning. She didn't usually leave without warning. He took out his cell phone and called her, but the call went straight to voicemail. He began to pace up and down the room, feeling more and more uneasy. He knew he needed to calm down, that maybe she was with her friends, but something inside her said something was wrong. He took a deep breath and decided to go to the kitchen for a glass of water. Upon reaching the kitchen, he found the door open. He entered and saw that the key was still in the lock. This was not normal. He looked around and noticed that something was out of place. A chair was overturned on the floor, the curtain looked torn. That's when he realized something was really wrong. He called the police, who soon arrived on the scene. They searched the house but found no leads. Rodrigo was inconsolable, not knowing what to do. He called all of Duda's friends and family, but no one knew her whereabouts. While waiting for news, Rodrigo began to question himself about the life he was leading with Duda. He thought about how little he was at home because of his work as a renowned psychiatrist. He thought about how Dudley always looked so happy, but was she really happy? Did he really know her? As the days passed, Rodrigo delved deeper and deeper in his search for answers. He searched every corner, rummaged through every drawer, talked to every one of Dudley's acquaintances. And with each clue that came up, the more he realized that he didn't know his wife like he thought. This was just the beginning of a long and exciting journey, full of mysteries, twists and discoveries. A journey that would lead Rodrigo to confront his own fears and limitations, and discover that the truth can be much more complex than he imagined. Rodrigo was sitting in the hospital waiting room, his hands sweaty and his heart racing. He had received a call from the police that they had found a body. They still weren't sure if it was Dudley's, but the description of the outfit was the same one she was wearing the night she disappeared. He tried to control his anxiety and remember the meditation techniques he used to teach his patients. But nothing seemed to work. He was on edge. Finally, the doctor entered the waiting room. "Dr. Rodrigo?" asked the doctor. "Yes, it's me," replied Rodrigo, quickly getting to his feet. "I'm sorry, but I don't have good news. We found a woman's body in a ditch near town. The clothing and physical characteristics match the descriptions of your wife. We need you to come and identify the body," said the doctor, with an expression of regret. Rodrigo felt a tightness in his chest. He followed the doctor into the room where the body was. When he saw Dudley's face, covered in bruises and cuts, he felt his world crumble around him. He cried non-stop, hugging his beloved's cold body. While the police carried out forensic investigations at the site, Rodrigo began to think about all the questions that still had. Rodrigo couldn't understand what that meant. Who would this J guy be? And what would have happened in the past? He kept the letter with him and continued to investigate, determined to uncover the truth behind his wife's disappearance and death. Rodrigo spent the night awake thinking about the letter he had found. He was determined to find out who this J guy was and what he had done in the past. After much research, he finally discovered that Jay was Dudley's ex-boyfriend. He managed to find Jay's address and went to her house to confront him. When he got there, Jay was visibly surprised and scared to see Rodrigo. He invited him in and explained that he had nothing to do with Dudley's disappearance and death. Rodrigo showed the letter to Jay and asked about what had happened in the past. Jay sighed and shared that years ago he had physically abused Dudley during a fight. He immediately regretted it and apologized, but Dudley ended the relationship and never wanted to see him again. Rodrigo was shocked by the revelation and didn't know how to deal with this information. He decided to leave and think about what to do next. As he walked down the street, he remembered a detail he'd forgotten. The night Dudley disappeared, she'd mentioned that she needed to find someone, but hadn't specified who. He decided to go back to Jay's house and ask him if he knew anything about the person Dudley wanted to meet. Jay was a little hesitant, but ended up confessing that Dudley had made a date with an old friend from school, who she hadn't seen for years. Rodrigo thanked him for the information and left in search of his school friend. He managed to locate him in another city and made an appointment to talk with him. When they met, Dudley's friend from school told him that he had mentioned that she was being followed by someone, but he didn't know who she was. Rodrigo became more and more intrigued by this information. Who could be following Dudley? It's because he decided he needed to keep investigating and discover the truth behind this mystery. After discovering that Dudley had made an appointment with a friend from school and that someone was following her, Rodrigo was more determined than ever to find the truth about her disappearance and death. He decided to revisit the place where Dudley's body was found to try to find any clues that could help him solve the case. When he got there, he noticed a crumpled piece of paper near where the body had been discovered. Unwrinkling it, he realized it was a note from Dudley with an address to an unknown location. Rodrigo decided to follow this lead and discovered that the address was a small abandoned house on the outskirts of town. He entered the house and found something shocking, a basement with several photos of Dudley, as well as newspaper clippings about her disappearance and death. Rodrigo was perplexed and frightened by what he had found. As he was examining the photos and clippings, he heard a noise coming from the entrance to the house. He quickly hid the photos and hid in a nearby room. There, he found an old diary that belonged to Dudley. Upon reading the diary, Rodrigo discovered that Duda had been involved with a married man and that he had threatened to expose the affair to his wife and her friends. He also discovered that this man was none other than Jay, Dudley's ex-boyfriend. Rodrigo was shocked by this revelation and decided to confront Jay again. When he found him, he showed him the photos and diary and demanded an explanation. Jay confessed that he had become obsessed with Dudley and that he had killed her to prevent her from revealing her affair to his wife and friends. Rodrigo was horrified by this confession and decided to call the police. Jay was arrested and convicted of the murder of Dudley. Finally, Rodrigo had found the truth about Duda's disappearance and death. Though relieved to have the case resolved, he still felt sadness and anger over his wife's death. He knew he would never be able to forget what had happened, but he hoped that justice would bring some kind of peace to Dudley's soul and her loved ones. After solving Duda's murder case, Rodrigo decided he needed to give his life a new direction. He had become obsessed with the death of his wife, and this had profoundly affected his mental and emotional health. He decided to quit his job as a psychiatrist and move to a small town upstate. There, he hoped to find peace and tranquility to heal his wounds and start his life anew. As soon as he arrived in the city, he rented a simple house and started to explore the place. He discovered that there was a park nearby that was frequented by the locals and decided to visit. In the park, he met a woman named Daniela. She was a local nurse and was walking her dog when they ran into each other. They started talking and discovered that they had a lot in common. Over time, Rodrigo and Daniela got closer and started dating. Rodrigo was happy to have found someone who understood him and helped him overcome his pain and suffering. Together they explored the city and fell in love with the tranquility and simplicity of country life. Rodrigo decided to start a small appliance repair business and became an active member of the local community. He knew he would never forget what had happened to Dudley, but now he had a new purpose in life. He was determined to move forward and find the happiness he had lost. The end of Duda's case marked the beginning of a new journey for Rodrigo. He learned that even though life can be cruel and unfair at times, there is still hope and possibilities to find peace and happiness. And so, he began to build a new life for himself and those who loved him.